This is TWiT.
There's a lot of speculation that somebody said Meta should have made this an R&D project, not the future, not bet the future of the company on it. They've spent $15 billion. They're doing about $10 billion a year on this. Brianna, I feel like one of the reasons you're seeing Microsoft showing up at Meta, probably doing deal with Apple, is that no one really knows how this landscape is going to play out. So everybody's kind of hedging their bets until, once somebody starts to win, then it all changes, of course. But we've seen that before in our own technologies. But my question is anybody going to win? Is this a technology anybody wants at all?
I had a really surreal experience. And I mean this with all respect to Emily Chang. I love her. I've been on her show on Bloomberg many, many times. Fantastic person. Love her. But something the last time I was on and noticed is it was a few times ago. It was the day that Facebook announced the Meta transformation. And there was this discussion on Wall Street. Oh, Meta, what is it going to be? Are they going to create? And it was all these Wall Street people, like with these, Heinlein-esque visions of the future about what it could be. And for me as a technologist, I'm sitting there listening to it, just analyzing the news that came out in a very different way. And the impression I got from that was this was more of a move for Wall Street to present a vision for Facebook in the future. Just like you were telling us before the show that you kind of had to be talked out of the Surface 9, Meta comes out with
I should
Oculus.
Say, I did buy the Quest Pro.
Oh, okay. Well, there it is. The Quest Pro.
That's partly because it has a 30-day return policy.
Sure.
But also, I feel like it's important for me to do the due diligence.
100%.
I did the Kickstarter for the original Oculus Quest. I want to give it a chance.
Right.
I don't want to write it off completely, but every time I try it, I say, well, clearly we're not ready for prime time. It's making me sick. It made 80% of the Army sick.
Right.
I think that this is a technology that seems like a good idea, but we don't have the means 100%.
Yet. And that's 100% my point that, I bought the original. I have every VR system that exists because I've done development on this. Right?
Oh, have you? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
It makes sense for gaming. I think it completely makes sense for gaming.
It can, but I have the exact same. It's like I buy a Quest. It's a really fun 24 to 48 hours, and then it lives in the drawer.
Never again.
I bought the Quest 2.
Yeah.
I had a really fun, seeing how much better Beat Saber was, and then it lived in a drawer. And I'm asking myself, when it comes to these kinds of meetings with people, do I think there's any chance I'm actually going to sit down and ever have a VR meeting with someone? I don't see that ever happening. This isn't a new phase for Facebook. They acquired Oculus in 2014 when the stories first started coming out. And now 8 years later, the question is, where's the users? Where's the use case for this? Where are people wanting to have this experience? It does not exist, unfortunately.
Ben Thompson, writing about this in Stratechery, he got an interview with Zuck and Nadella together, kind of came out somewhat bullish on this. He says VR does have real utility, but I think utility will be realized in the enterprise first, in part because the value of VR only becomes apparent when you use it, and you're more likely to use it if your company pays for it. He also says Microsoft is well placed to deliver that utility on top of Meta hardware. Meta is likely to be the catalyst for VR becoming a widely used technology. Now, he doesn't mention Apple at all. I also feel like a lot of this was a rush to get out in front of the market before Apple announces something early next year. Sam, do you think that's what's going on?
That wouldn't surprise me. Meta has been, Facebook's been trying to find something new. Aside from the things that they've bought and copied, they've never really created anything new since the beginning of Facebook.
The news feed was the last.
Yeah, I guess.
Thing.
Yeah, that was. Yeah. But when you see a potential competitor, another potential competitor, one with very deep pockets, that is potentially doing something that could be disruptive to your business, yeah, you may want to jump into that.
A lot of companies said, we should have paid attention when the iPhone came along. Microsoft famously, Steve Ballmer said, it's too expensive. Nobody's going to buy it, and regretted that, lived to regret that. Do you think they're worried that the same thing will happen?
That's certainly a possibility. I mean, nobody wants to be left behind when there's something big. I mean, when you look at the smartphone space, Google and Samsung, are the really the only ones who were able to respond quickly enough to the iPhone, to put up real viable competition. I mean, Windows was too little, too late with Windows Phone. And I think like most platforms, there's probably not room for more than maybe 2, at most 3 platforms. So whoever gets a foothold early on, and it won't necessarily be the first one out the door. I mean, there were lots of companies that made MP3 players before the iPod came along.
That's right.
There were lots of smartphones before the iPhone. So it's not necessarily the first that is going to succeed, but whoever does it right first, whoever comes up with a good product first, is going to have a better chance of success. And then maybe the second and the third, but most likely only the second, will really have an opportunity to be competitive with them because of all the platform lock-in challenges. But going back to what Brianna and Daniel said, and I think you said, this is not something that I want to use. Even in there are some good applications for this. Some of the training stuff that's done with systems like HoloLens is really useful. I've seen some really good applications for VR, for example, in design, product design. Ford
showed us.
Yeah, every automaker does this. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I first saw the Lucid Air in 2016, I was with their head of design, and he put an HTC Vive on my head, and he gave me a design walk around with that, before seeing the actual car, and being able to, and it's not just cars, but, any kind of product design, that it's a great use case for that. But for things like meeting with people, I don't want to sit around with a headset on, for 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day. That is just not something people are not going to want to do that. I've done that. I've done shorter stints, briefings I did a briefing with an automaker last year, where they sent out Quest headsets, to do this briefing in the Quest environment. And, the thing, once you put that headset on, it's like if I'm in a meeting or, in a briefing, I want to take notes, whether it's handwritten notes or typed, I want to be able to take notes. Sometimes, recording stuff. You can't do that when you're in a VR headset. It's just a terrible environment to spend extended periods of time in for work.
It really makes me ask, what's the problem it's trying to solve? I mean, Zoom meetings maybe not the best thing in the world, but neither are in-person meetings, but they work. And I'm not sure why it would be better to do Teams in an Oculus Pro. Daniel, do you agree, disagree? Do you think that that's the future of meetings?
Yeah, it's like I see augmented reality where you still see that your world around you and holograms and everything there is the real goal of all this. And that seems to me, it's going to be really interesting. But I feel like that's still so many years off from being a reality for average people, who can't afford a $3,000 headset. And even there, the use case, it's like we still need smarter technology to make use of it. Like this idea of like, and it's kind of scary, right? Walking around, but you have a camera on there, visually IDs a person and brings up their info automatically, or you can ID stuff quickly and look it up, almost like being a cyborg, right? Like I feel like that's where all this will eventually go. And that makes sense. But this idea of like a VR headset, and don't forget, Microsoft years ago showed off what they called a holoportation, where they used a room, had a bunch of cameras in it, and it would scan you and it would create a hologram of the person. And this idea of like, in the future, we may have like little setups in our homes that does that. Like that's a little bit more realistic in a sense, because you're still like in your environment. You could still take notes. You could still do stuff while you see a hologram of a person. And I think that makes sense but again, limited cases. And I bet Apple's play here is rumored to be along the, iMessage and, making video calls. And I'm sure it's going to be something along those lines where it's connecting like FaceTime, a virtual FaceTime. And I think that might work in this idea of like you're making limited calls to people and having that, but not necessarily meetings. I don't really see a huge use case for it. Sam mentioned some really good issues, right? Taking notes, I think, is a pretty big limitation if you're going to be in a meeting all day. But
is this a better way or is this just another way? So I think there's a groupthink mentality when everybody in Silicon Valley is going, VR, AR, mixed R, that there's this kind of thing like, oh, well, they must know what they're talking about. And the more people do it, but is it possible they just could be completely wrong? And that that Facebook's going to spend $10 billion a year and tens of thousands of engineers on something that is just never going to take off?
Remember when 3D came back?
3D TV phones, is a really good example.
3D TVs, even 3Ds at movie theaters, like it just kind of it peaked a little bit and just, no one did the 3D TV thing, right? And it seemed like a great idea, like why not? But it just never caught on.
Nobody wanted to wear the glasses.
Yeah.
And
can we go through history?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to say, can we go through history here a bit? What I find really interesting about all of this is think through the history of the computer industry. Before word processors and spreadsheets were easy to use, geeks, people like us, we saw that. We were early adopters. We were like, this is such a good experience. We're willing to put up with the headaches, and we pushed through. We did that exact same pattern for MP3 players before it became something like the iPhone. We did it with personal data assistants back when it was the Palm Pilot. We did it on the internet when it was the 2400 baud modem that you were dialing into. There's a pattern of us, for all of us here, that we see the value in these things and we jump in early and we deal with the headaches and we put our foot down with all of that. I think it is so important to this that everyone on the show today has tried VR. We've given it a fair shake. And as we're all saying, it's something that lives in a drawer eventually. There is something that's just fundamentally not useful about any of this. And even for the case, like you're talking about, Daniel, like the HoloLens presentation a while back, Zuckerberg had two avatars he put out. One was a cartoony, silly looking thing. The other one was like a photorealistic thing for him to like put his vision forward. What I saw with that as a game developer was something that the average consumer is going to have to spend $25,000 having a team of people make with ZBrush and normal mapping and rigging and texture mapping and painting wrinkles into the skin and all this other stuff that no one is ever going to do. And I just don't see people spending that money. And I don't think this is a process that can be automated in a way that looks anywhere remotely real. Like you'll get to where it just looks like do you remember the N64 contest where they would put your face on a Bond character for you? Oh, we'll get that good, but it's not gonna look like what's.
Yeah.
Well, it was just cheesy. You can cheat it with displacement maps to a certain extent, but you're talking about something so high poly that then you're talking about the only way to make that data smaller is to do a decimation pass on it, which is a professional, like you can't automate that. That is judgment. So there's just all these things here. And it's like, this is not going to be better than Zoom. And you're taking 100 times the processing power and it's going to cost more and you're going to feel sick all day.
I'm Jason Howell. What do you get your favorite geek who already has everything? Well, I know just the thing. It's a Club TWiT gift subscription, of course. TWiT podcasts keep them informed and entertained with the most relevant tech news and podcasts available. And with a Club TWiT subscription, they get even more. They get access to all of our podcasts ad-free, the members-only Discord, exclusive outtakes, behind the scenes and special content, and exclusive shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. You can purchase your geek's gift at twit.tv/clubtwit, and they're going to thank you every day for it.